Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on identity risk intelligence for the AI-empowered enterprise. I'm Onishi. I'm the marketing manager here at Opal Security, and we're so excited to have you here today. Before we dive into it, I just wanted to give everyone some context on who Opal Security is and how we got to here today. For years, traditional IGA solutions focused heavily on automation, with organizations implementing birthright provisioning, automating easy grants, streamlining access. And so this automation first approach kind of created significant security issues with access being granted too easily and too broadly. You end up with overprivileged users, stale permissions, constantly expanding attack surface. So while Opal started off with governance, we built our platform on secure IGA principles like least privilege and just-in-time access, giving people and systems exactly what they need, when they need it, and nothing more. So as the market evolved, we're seeing that those principles aren't just best practices, they're necessary. Modern organizations need solutions that could address core IGA workflows while maintaining security as the top priority and not an afterthought. So here at Opal, we're recognizing that so sorry. That access moves rapidly, touches everything, and changes constantly. So we're building an authorization and reasoning platform that identity security needs now: scale, speed, and intelligence. So leading today's webinar is Barrett Woodside, head of strategy here at Opal Security, Grant, Empey, our product lead, and Ryan Riddle, an engineer on our development team. So I'm going to hand it to Barrett to kick us off.
Cool. Thanks so much, Monishi. Really appreciate it. Next slide, please. And then next one more time. Thanks so much. Yeah, so at Opal, we've really realized that AI agents are here to stay, especially in hypergrowth businesses in the Bay Area and recent venture-backed businesses. It's very common to use Cursor to assist with software development, perhaps Anthropic's Claude models to write AI copy. I think on the consumer side, ChatGPT is super popular. And of course, GitHub Copilot. So if AI agents are here to stay and they're really transforming your business and enhancing productivity, how are you going to handle them? Next slide. So agents are really expanding the enterprise attack surface. In recent weeks, we've seen vulnerabilities in both Ray and GitHub's MCP server exposed. And compared to traditional human risks, insider threats, for example, agents introduce new access risks to the same resources, right? So agents can execute, new types of SQL code injection, for example, and they make existing attack surfaces even more vulnerable than they were previously. Next slide. So that poses the question, how will your security and authorization plans change, right? We need to respond to the changing threat landscape. So then the first question is, how does your organization distinguish between agents and humans? So a lot of IDPs don't make these distinctions properly. And then the question is, if you're looking solely at NHIs in one tool and you're looking solely at employees in another, is that sufficient to, map the bigger picture? And then once you've gained visibility, so let's say you do have some level of observability on your NHIs, how are you going to model threat, attribute ownership, and enforce authorization? Next slide, please. So we're very lucky at Opal that we've been working with a number of AI-centric companies for quite a long time, including Databricks, Perplexity, Elastic, and Grammarly. And they've been facing these issues sort of earlier than I'd say the broader market. Next slide. So that means, security teams have to respond to these threats, and observability is the baseline. There are a lot of vendors on the market that, help you have a dashboard where you can view IAM and access policies. And, some are just beginning to flag NHIs as distinct from, static service accounts. But we believe that every identity needs an accountable owner, whether that's an employee or contractor. Every service account and every agent, every LLM has to be tied back to someone who is responsible for the output of that model or agent. And then agents need to be authorized. You need to enforce parameters of what they can access. So, as much as time-bound access to resources for employees, makes a lot of sense for businesses' crown jewels. Agents should probably have, equal access restrictions or maybe even more strict access restrictions than the employees that they report to. So that means that you really need authorization enforcement for protocols like MCP and A2A, which we'll get into a little bit later in this webinar. Next slide. Cool. So this is our agenda for the day, and we're very excited to take you through. We've taken you through some of the changes in the security landscape, but we're actually going to hand it over to Grant Empey, who will introduce Opal's risk layer and show some of the other AI features that we have in our product. So over to you, Grant.
Cool. Thanks so much for sharing that context, Barrett. And, like Barrett's talking about, there's a lot of changes that are happening because of these attack surface areas having new ways to sort of uh, be exposed. And then also, the existing exposure that already exists is amplified by a lot of the automated agentic tooling that's being put out there. And so the next few slides are really our answer to the questions that Barrett posed in a couple slides ago. So the first sort of layer here, the risk layer that we'll be demoing, is our observability layer with some remediation attached to it as well. And then next we're going to look at sort of, we're not just detecting sort of AI vulnerabilities, but we're using AI as a tool to help make your organizations more secure. And then the last piece over here is building in ways for you to automate security at your company and sort of turn your security approach agentic through Opal's MCP server and the new protocol we've implemented. And we have Ryan on the call today who's going to be able to walk us through that. And then finally, we'll of course have time for a quick Q&A, about 10 minutes at the end. Cool. So diving right into it, why we built the risk layer. There's a huge volume of data that exists in your organization, both in terms of the scale of your access graph and how many, users, how many systems, how many groups you have, in addition to all the logging that needs to happen to track these surface areas. So things are already, operating at a really large scale. That's really hard for one person to hold all that context in their head. And then you sort of fold in all the NHIs and all the agentic sort of workflows that are being rolled out where humans aren't even necessarily in the loop. So not only is it really hard to get all the information, but that information might not be as accessible as it was before when you could just, Slack your coworker, or email your coworker for information. It's going to be a little bit harder to sort of get the context for like a service account or even sort of an agent that's maybe not able to well explain what it's doing and what it's accessing in a clear and easy to approach way. And so the risk layer, all it is it sort of meets you where your organization is now, whether you've already developed agents or whether you're still in the process of securing a lot of your core IGA workflows. And so your journey kind of starts in the risk layer with enforcing just-in-time sort of protocols for how you govern your resources and enforcing least privilege as a principle. So that just means giving users the access that's right for their job and no more and no less. And that helps with both security and governance. And then next up, as you evolve, you can sort of turn your attention to agents and NHIs and other service accounts more broadly, and you can start applying those same principles there. But you do sort of start to run into the scaling issue that I was calling out earlier with a lot of these agentic workflows that are going to be implemented at your organization. And so the risk center is going to evolve along with your organization and help you handle those. And ultimately, you'll be able to roll out all these agents in a secure and compliant way and really be a force for unblocking your team's productivity by allowing these NHIs to be rolled out at scale without any worries on the security or compliance side. So that's sort of the motivating force behind why we built the risk layer. And here's sort of how we think about the autonomy part that we're building out to help you handle your scale. So sort of like self-driving cars, there's different levels of automation that you can apply to your approach to identity security. And so here we've kind of broken it down into 3 examples across, level 1, which is, some mild assistance, level 3, which is automation where you want it and when you're ready for it. And then level 5, which is, once you've built out that trust in your security suite of tools, allowing that automation to fully take place. And then the human is in the loop more as, somebody that checks in and makes sure that, your automations are behaving as you expect, or that you're able to sort of see the reporting and the progress and maybe guide the system going forward. But really it's at that point in full automation, you've sort of let the agent or the automated workflow take on a lot of the sort of work there. And then on the right, you've sort of seen the different levers that exist here. So, you can have alerting at around level 3. You have your actionable remediation flow at around level 5, where, in the past you had humans sort of diving into end systems and fixing access directly. Now Opal can already today just handle that whole entire remediation for you. And then, back down to level 1, you have your non-human identities, and it's really about that observability piece that Barrett was speaking to earlier around, step 1 is just sort of seeing what exists. So putting the image on the right sequentially and sort of mapping it to the left, what you'd have there is, starting out with observability. And then once you feel like you've integrated your data and you're able to see all of it, you'd want to set up some alerting around it to see, what would a system like Opal catch? And then once you've seen consistent results over time in the alerting, that's when maybe you're a bit more comfortable automating these things because you've sort of seen, what does the light at the end of the tunnel look like? And am I confident enough in sort of the alerting that, I want to transition these from being alerts to being direct actions that I can get reports on later. So that's sort of how we see the automated journey in terms of tackling this like risk layer process that we called out in the previous slide. And so at this point, I think, what we can do is just show you a demo rather than just, talk about it. And so I want to dive into our product real quick and just walk you through sort of the story so far here. So what you see at the top is sort of the beginnings of what you'd see in terms of observability. You can see an overall view of your environment and what are the different vulnerabilities that exist. Because remember, sort of our goal here is sort of to address of this sort of workflow and this experience is to address risks and vulnerabilities in your identity posture. And so here we look at a variety of factors, including, unused access, outside access, and irregular access. And unused access is pretty self-explanatory. It's just, a identity, whether it's an agent or it's a human, has access to something that it's not using. If that agent were ever compromised or that human were ever compromised, you wouldn't want them to sort of use those, have access to those systems and kind of lateral surface area of the attack. That's not something you'd want. And then there's a similar story for outside access. Let's say you put in a lot of hard work, putting in policies for how agents get access to different systems. Maybe you take a human in the loop approach where an agent has to request access to a AWS role in order to actually take actions within your cloud environment. In that case, we'd be able to catch if it somehow bypassed that request process that you put in place, which agents are sort of known to do. If you give them broad instructions, they'll find a way to get it done. And then the last piece is sort of the irregular access and anomaly detection. And this is really important in terms of, catching any unexpected behaviors that your automated identities might be performing. So for example, if you've ingested, let's say 100 NHIs or 100 AI agents into Opal, we can sort of look at what are the baseline behaviors across these different identities and what are the baseline attributes, and then identify sort of differences using our machine learning models to understand, okay, is one of these agents behaving erratically today? And maybe you've automated sort of the remediation approach, and so you can shut it down in real time and prevent the compromise from taking place if it actually is an attack. Or if you're still at sort of the alerting phase, you can just set an alert that says, hey, there's something strange going on in my environment. So those are 3 sort of attack vectors that we're considering today already within the product: unused access, outside access, or are they circumventing your policies? And then irregular access, which is sort of this behavioral and sort of attribute detection of there's something strange going on with this identity, be it human, NHI, or agent. And then below you see sort of our suggestions where we look at your environment. And remember, we sort of talked about how the scale of your access graph is too big for one person to hold inside their head. What we sort of do is break apart the problem into smaller pieces so you can prioritize, your most sensitive environments and sort of take immediate action there. And this is a process that security companies, obviously already have in place today, where they go through and they label all of their end systems and they try to understand, what is most at risk and what is most sensitive, and then meet in the middle and start, remediating in the order of the systems that score the highest in both categories. So Opal is really, taking a lot of the legwork out of your organization and just sort of running the detection internally on those systems. And so what you'll see here is an ordered list of suggestions that you can take. So for example, cleaning up your Google environment here, or looking at your IDP automations that you put in place because, again, if you want to sort of secure for the future, you have to be able to look at the automations that you've built and make sure that they're not having unintended consequences. And so in this case, we're looking at your Okta rules here, and we're basically saying, hey, looks like there's a lot of sort of over provisioned and in some cases even anomalous users coming from your Okta rules, which is strange because you'd expect, by definition, rules not to cause anomalies because there should be some consistency enforced. Um, so that's a quick overview of the suggestions. And then lastly, you sort of see the data breakdown, which is, highly queryable. You can slice and dice this data by, type and a few other different vectors. So for example, let's say we want to look at, all of the non-human identities in our environment. We can do that here. So we can look at a breakdown of, our GCP service accounts. We can look at Azure, and we can look at also agentic sort of identities that are baked in. And so you can slice and dice by a variety of, specific assets. You could break it down by types of assets. Maybe you're investigating certain types of vulnerabilities. All of that is queryable in sort of our risk center. But we do provide sort of this ordered approach. If you're sort of at the stage of planning and your rollout of your securing your crown jewels, where you still need to identify even what your crown jewels are. So whether you're very early in your journey of rolling out sort of identity security for your crown jewels, or you know exactly what you want, Opal has different surface areas that cater to both stages in your planning there. And so I'll wrap up our risk center demo at this point, but if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the chat. I think Barrett's going to call them out at the end in our Q&A. Cool. So moving into our next product surface area, human in the loop guides. So this is really exciting. We'll actually go, right back to risk center, but in a very specific surface here. Again, going back to that sort of problem of, there's a lot of context that exists in your environment, be it sort of your behavioral logs, be it in your organizational chart and, the titles that exist throughout and how the teams are broken down. And when somebody last used it. And so what's sort of happening today is in UAR is people are going in and investigating themselves. They'll DM their coworker or DM another user at their organization. What Opal does is sort of gathers that context and investigates within your organization for you, and then surfaces the analysis back. So it saves a lot of heartache around waiting for people on other teams that have other things that they think that they should be doing, and waiting for replies on that end. You can just sort of see the data up front and make decisions there. So here what we see is a recommendation that, Andrew here has access to our MCP agent, and it's really highly sensitive within Opal because it's covering all of our API endpoints, and source were to get compromised, that would be pretty bad news for Opal and our customers. And so what we'd want to do is, reduce the access here just in case Andrew were to ever be compromised through social engineering or some other means, our MCP systems would still be safe. And so what our breakdown justification is doing is, again, pulling in the data around the org chart, around the behavioral logs, around the usage data. And you can see sort of it's identified that Andrew has not used this in the last 30-day period, but he still has some time remaining. So there is some value in cutting off his access now. Or setting it to expire sooner than 5 days. But yeah, so this is the quick sort of summary of our analysis tool that we're building. It's really exciting to sort of see, as we inject this in different surface areas of our product, be it risk center, be it UARs, how it improves decision making and allows people to not have a sort of analysis paralysis across their environment. And then the last piece here is around the access requests demo. And so this is really exciting because, let me see if that link is working. Okay, no worries. I can navigate over to find a requestable resource. 1 second. Cool. Okay, cool. So this should work here. And so what we've essentially built out is an evaluation of the reasons that people say that they need access for a resource. So one thing Opal allows your users to do is have self-service access requests where they can get access to the systems they need. And on your sort of security side, you can delegate approvers who will say, yes, this person does need access, or no, they don't. And if you don't have an IGA tool, you're probably running this through an ITSM workflow already. And so it's a very similar process in Opal that's already built out. But you might also know that a lot of the time it's garbage in, garbage out. So if people put in, a really bad reason, I need it for my job, and it might take a couple seconds to load here. But what you'll really sort of see is coaching. So similarly to how people have, phishing training, which helps them respond well to emails that are coming in and, better understand what is a vulnerable or like a risky action look like. We sort of do that here, where you can sort of get a breakdown of what is the rationale of somebody's access, and then you can coach them toward better behaviors. And so in this case, right, there's not a lot of specifics. What we're going to sort of do with our AI engine is coach somebody toward a better reason for access. Now, what's really cool is that it's actually pretty dynamic. So if I copy the same phrase a bunch of times, it'll actually refresh or add text in any case, right? And so it's actually picking up on the things that I'm doing. So maybe you have a really irritated user who's been denied this a bunch of times and he's just like, I need it for my job. I need it for my job. You're going to sort of get that coaching and just say, hey, this isn't actually how you should get access. And there's ways to get faster approval. And so it tries to align the recommendations with the user's goal. And so we're really excited about this project because it's going to help approvers make quick decisions because they'll be able to understand, why users are requesting access better. And then if you kind of go way down the road to when you're back in Risk Center or you're back in your UAR, you're going to have really strong qualitative data that's going to help you make a decision even a year down the line for whether or not somebody should have access. So having this on the record is actually really valuable, and you're going to need it later. And so that's why this sort of quality coaching is so important. And so I believe that's the last of the product demo I'm showing today. Yep, I'm going to hand it off to Ryan. He's our lead AI engineer that's been building out our MCP server approach. And I won't steal any of his thunder by describing it. So Ryan, if you could come on and walk them through the product you built, that would be awesome.
Hey, yeah, sorry, just getting the setup, taking over the presentation. Yeah, so I'm Ryan. I've been working on building out the MCP server here at Opal. So MCP servers allow LLMs to interact with real-world data. It's a protocol that allows kind of any company with different processes or different data sources the ability to send data and get instructions from a LLM. So I'm going to demo with cursor. In the chat settings, you can just hook up an LLM, or sorry, an MCP server. And so you can see this one here. And I'll walk through two examples for like how we would actually use this in Opal. First, I'm going to start with like a simple exploratory use case, finding like all events for a specific user. So I'll put in the prompt to find all events relevant to a user with my email. And we'll see that cursor is able to identify that it should call our MCP server with the proper, well, actually, this is incorrect, but you'll see that it is able to identify that. And
Sorry to
then,
interrupt. Are you sharing your screen? Maybe it's just me, Barrett. I don't know if you can see it.
yeah, I should be sharing my screen. I think
I
in
can
the
see it.
top.
Okay,
Yep.
sorry to interrupt.
No worries. So yeah, just run this. Another good thing about MCP tooling is that it makes sure that you verify all of the API calls it's going to make before it actually does them. So you can make sure that it's not injecting any weird values that you didn't intend. So we'll run this. It will recognize that we need an ID. And so it will then look up that a user at that email, find the user ID, and then we can call the events endpoint with that user ID. And we get back all the events that that user did. So we see a login event, we get some tokens, and the user's added to some groups on May 23rd. And so next we can say like, or when was he added to these groups and by who? Let's say they shouldn't be in these groups. We want to know if they're added to them all at once or not, and if they're added by a malicious user or not. So we're able to find all these different events where the user is added. And it's having some issues right now. Okay, and then let's remove me from engineering groups. So we'll get my user ID again, and then we'll find all the groups that I'm a member of. Searching for the group name engineering, it will return those the previous ones that we found from the events. And then it would actually kind of make those requests to remove that user without having to go through the UI. And it allows you to ask different questions and kind of get different information in a less structured and kind of more natural way using like the LLM technology. So let's try a harder example. This like complex use case would be adding a new user and mirroring the access of an existing teammate. So there's this user, Abby, with an email, and I want to groups that have engineering in their name that this other teammate, the user with email Ryan at opal.test is a member of, and then create requests to add the onboarding user to all the groups that their teammate is a member of. So it makes the plan. It's gonna first find my user ID, then it'll get all groups with engineering in their name, and then it will create a request for the new user to join those groups. It also needs to get the ID of the new user. Then it's going to iterate through all 4 of those groups to check if I'm a member of it. I'm a member of the first one, just called engineering. I am also a member of the second one and the third one. And I'm the only member of that last one. So it identifies correctly that I'm a member of those 4 different engineering groups. And then it makes a request for this new onboarded to join all those groups with a reason. And yeah, I'm not going to send that so I don't mess up the environment, but it's just a quick intro of like some of the different kinds of workflows that you can do with this MCP server. It's able to query all the data that we provide through our APIs and take any action that our APIs allow you to take. But it kind of works through an LLM like Claude or ChatGPT and is able to like interpret what the user intends in like natural language and convert it into API calls that can interact with your system and basically the outside world, which is typically restricted from large language models. And yeah, that's all for my demo.
Cool. Thanks so much, Ryan. And I think this is really exciting to help security organizations scale what they do because, traditionally you need an engineer that's building out integrations with these different existed within Opal, and companies were generally happy to do it. But now you actually have the ability for a non-technical person to interact with an agent and arbitrarily pull from Opal's endpoints and get their questions answered, handle reporting, and even take direct action in the environment, like Ryan was able to demonstrate with the onboarding the new user case. So I think there's a lot of sort of exciting open-ended use cases that you can pull from there. I'm going to reshare my screen. And cool. I guess we're at the point of Q&A. Barrett, do you want to take it from here?
Sure. Yeah, we have a couple questions that have come in from the audience, and I guess we'll kick it off with the first one. So I think this is for you, Grant. What's the largest deployment that Opal supports?
Yeah, that's a good question. So to date, our largest deployment has been around 80,000 users, but we've stress tested it up to 200,000. And if your organization is even larger than that for an initial deployment, part of our job is to make sure that we can handle it. So let us know. We're happy to follow up on that.
Cool, that's great. And what are your support SLAs?
Yeah, we have really sort of best in class service SLAs. So within business hours, you're guaranteed to get a response within 2 hours. And it's usually even faster for incidents, but that's the window that we commit to during business time.
Awesome. So, if is customer data isolated from other customers in Opal's AI products?
Yes, absolutely. So what you'll basically see is, as you saw in the risk center, we're using a lot of machine learning to do anomaly detection, to do ranking, and kind of a lot of these different processes. We train a model on each customer's environment individually, and that data is totally isolated. It's not shared within environments. It's really just looking at your graph and training on that data. So complete isolation on our end.
Cool, that's reassuring. So I like this one. What would you say your deepest integrations are? Would it be Snowflake or Terraform or something else? AWS maybe?
Yeah, so I think we sort of pride ourselves in our integrations in the sense that they're, read only, but also write. And so not only can we ingest data in, but we can also make changes on the end system, which is really valuable for that automation piece. And so we sort of tier our integrations based on, the read and the write and how deep we go in those integrations. So, our first class integrations are always going to be the IDPs. We ingest all the data from your identity provider. We pull in all the users. We pull in all of their attributes and also each of the groups and systems that those users have access to. So our IDPs across, Okta, Azure, Google Groups, et cetera, are all very tight integrations. The second sort of area we focus on are, your crown jewels. So, it may not have the breadth that your IDP integration has, but with your crown jewels, you'll have really, really deep native integrations that give you insights beyond groups and beyond roles. And so our native integrations, we sort of focus on your cloud suite, which tend to be extremely sensitive. So that's your Google Cloud, it's your AWS, it's your Azure. And then we also have as first class sort of integrations, a lot of data integrations. So that includes Snowflake, Databricks, and then also some core sensitive workflow tools like GitHub as well. And so those are sort of where how I would classify it is, your IDP is always going to be a very strong integration. And then we try to look at your crown jewels, which are typically your sort of cloud product suite, and make sure those are secure as well.
Cool, thanks for that. Okay, this next one. Can you compare and contrast attributes of service accounts like NHIs, agents, and humans? I guess I'll take this one. So it's sort of interesting. We have had support for service accounts for quite some time. And of course, service accounts have to be attributable to a provisioned user in your IDP. And agents are really the same way. They're also attributable to a user. However, because agents can have their own access grants and revocations and be attributed, have access in the graph to a whole bunch of resources, we basically treat them like humans. So agents can have access grants approved and revoked just like humans. So it's sort of interesting that both service accounts and agents are technically NHIs, but in Opal, agents and humans are basically treated the same. Okay, this next one. What use cases are you seeing for MCP today?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. I think when I look at the bottleneck for MCP adoption, I think it's less sort of the quality of the MCP protocol, and it's more the extent of how much organizations have rolled out agents internally. And so where we've seen the strongest adoption with our customers and in the market has primarily been around IT service desk flows. I think aside from sort of some areas in like copywriting, I think IT and sort of frontline customer support have been the areas where we've seen the most adoption of agents. And so where that is sort of relevant to Opal is around automating a lot of the ITSM or service desk flows that you have and allowing agents to interact directly with there. So a few of our more AI focused customers have already sort of built out those integrations, and they're excited to get started.
That's awesome. That seems like a huge boost in efficiency. How should I think about migrating my organization to JIT? Let's say I'm just getting started in this journey of security modernization.
Yeah, so I think that sort of harkens back to this slide that Barrett showed toward the beginning, or that I actually showed toward the beginning, which was around, the starting point is, regardless of whether it's a human identity or a non-human identity or the agent subtype of an NHI, you really want to make sure that access is sort of right-sized in terms of the scope of access and the duration of access. And so if you've already sort of prioritized that for your organization and you have alignment on the urgency there, there's sort of two roads to go down. One is sort of future-proofing your policies and making sure that your organization can handle future access. And that's typically where organizations start, is they want to, stop the bleeding metaphorically, and they just want to sort of make sure that their policies are JIT. And so what they'll do is they'll go and use, an integration we have with something like Terraform, for example, which is an orchestration configuration tool that'll really help you scale your policies across your entire environment. And they'll basically say, hey, for this subset of systems, we want to roll out JIT. And they'll typically take a phased approach where, they do their most sensitive systems first and sort of cascade downward, sort of like the ranking you saw in our risk center, where we started with the most sensitive systems and then worked our way downward. And so they'll sort of future-proof these JIT policies. And then once they've built out the policies for these different systems, they'll measure what does my current state of my graph look like against those policies. So if you said, for all EC2 instances, we want to have, a time-bound duration of 1 day for every access grant, what they'll look at is say, okay, how many of the edges in our graph or how many of the grants in our graph between users and EC2 systems conform to that policy? And for the ones that don't, we'll convert them to that policy now. And so just give them that 1 day of access. They'll get an email heads up, or the users that have access will get an email heads up that they might need to extend it. And then they'll sort of roll out that way. But it typically does need to be a phased approach, and you need to make sure you're getting buy-in from your partner teams, or there could be some pushback. So the way we recommend sort of mitigating that is really start with the most sensitive systems that your team has a lot of control over to sort of, prove out that this is something that, can work. It won't really obstruct people's workflows, and actually there's a ton of benefits. And then you sort of roll out from your organization there. And so that's something Opal helps with throughout all stages, whether it's sort of you're starting at the beginning and you're identifying how do I want to take my phased approach to JIT, and starting with your most sensitive systems, Opal will flag those for you. Or maybe you're really far along and you've already done the work of identifying those systems, and maybe you've even identified your policies. At that point, you can just remediate them all in Risk Center in bulk and sort of convert your organization there to the extent that you're comfortable. So that's sort of how I would approach that question. But I think the biggest rate limiter is just how much alignment have you built with other teams, and what are people comfortable taking on in terms of your timeline.
Cool. That's awesome. Well, I think that's our last question for today's session. Anisha, you want to take us out?
Sure, we can go to the last slide. Sorry, Grant, could you go to the next slide? Yeah. So thank you guys so much for joining our webinar live. We'll also be sending a recording of this to all of our attendees. So if you have any questions later, feel free to reach out to anyone on our team. All their emails are listed there. Also, if you're interested in checking out the platform for yourself, you can go through our interactive demo. It's just opal.dev/try now. And if you think you're ready to schedule an agent-ready security eval with our team, just an evaluation of your environment, you can also go on opal.dev/schedule-demo. Thanks again. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.